Maya wiped sweat from her forehead inside her helmet, a useless gesture that had become automatic after 4 hours of intense work in the heat exchanger chamber. The sixth and final primary heat exchanger hummed with renewed efficiency, its thermal output readings now showing the stable patterns that indicated proper calibration. She stepped back and surveyed her work, feeling a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with the temperature around her. The massive cylindrical units that had been struggling with cascading failures now operated in perfect harmony, their thermal exchange rates balanced and optimized for maximum efficiency. "Final diagnostic complete," Maya announced into her communicator. "All 6 primary heat exchangers are now operating within normal parameters. Thermal efficiency is at 97% of design specifications." Through the observation window, she could see Manager Thulwar checking and rechecking his displays, his massive Corvan frame moving with excited energy. His voice came through her speaker with unmistakable amazement. "Confirmed. All thermal regulation systems are showing green indicators for the first time in 6 months. Chamber temperature is already beginning to normalize, and we're seeing cooling effects throughout the lower levels." Commander Vextar's voice crackled from orbit, carrying a tone Maya had never heard from him before, something that might have been all mixed with professional pride. "Outstanding work, Chun. What is your current biological status?" Maya checked her suit's medical displays. After 4 continuous hours in temperatures that had peaked at 61 degrees Celsius, her core temperature had stabilized at 38.2 degrees elevated but well within normal human ranges. Her suit's cooling system had performed flawlessly, though she could feel it beginning to cycle down as the chamber temperature dropped. "All biological indicators normal, Commander. Core temperature slightly elevated but stable. Suit systems functioning perfectly. I'm ready for extraction whenever convenient." "Negative, Chun. You will remain in place until chamber temperature drops to safe levels for standard extraction procedures. I will not risk thermal shock by moving you too quickly from that environment." Maya smiled at her commander's continued caution. It was exactly the kind of leadership she had learned to respect during her service with the Galactic Maritime Corps, but she also understood that something fundamental had changed in the past 4 hours, not just the mining station's thermal systems, but her crewmates' understanding of human capabilities died as she waited for the chamber to cool. Maya began packing her tools and reviewing the final calibration settings. The work had been complex but not unprecedented, the kind of thermal engineering challenge she had trained for throughout her career. What made it significant was not the technical difficulty, but the environmental conditions that had prevented anyone else from completing it. Manager Thulwar entered the chamber 20 minutes later, his environmental suit registering the much more comfortable temperature of 45 degrees Celsius. His movements showed none of the careful deliberation she had observed earlier, and his voice carried genuine enthusiasm. "Specialist Chun, I owe you an apology," he said, his rocky features visible through his helmet's faceplate. "When I first learned that a human had volunteered for this assignment, I thought it was either a mistake or misplaced bravery. My people have always prided ourselves on our resistance to environmental extremes, but what you have accomplished today—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "You have worked for 4 hours in conditions that would have incapacitated the strongest Corvan worker in half that time. Not only did you survive, you performed complex, technical work with precision and efficiency that exceeded anything my regular crews could have achieved." Maya finished securing her tools and turned to face him. "Thank you, Manager Thulwar. But I want to make something clear. What I did today wasn't about proving humans are tougher than other species. It was about understanding that every species has different strengths. And sometimes the solution requires matching the right person to the right challenge." They made their way back through the station's corridors, and Maya noticed immediate changes in the environment. The temperature was dropping perceptibly, crew members were moving with renewed energy, and she could see work teams preparing to return to areas that had been evacuated earlier. In the main operational center, dozens of species were working together to restore full mining operations. The large display screen showed thermal readings throughout the station returning to normal parameters, and production indicators were already beginning to climb back toward standard levels. Dr. Zilani was waiting for them in the medical bay, her pale blue features showing the deep concern Maya had come to expect from the ship's medical staff. Her tentacle-like appendages moved with nervous energy as she approached with a variety of diagnostic equipment. "Maya, I need to conduct a full medical evaluation immediately," she said, her voice carrying professional authority mixed with personal worry. Prolonged exposure to those temperatures could have caused cellular damage that might not show immediate symptoms. Maya submitted to the examination willingly, understanding that Dr. Zilani's concerns came from genuine care and scientific curiosity. The medical scanner hummed over her body for several minutes, taking detailed readings of everything from cellular metabolism to neurological function. When the results appeared on Dr. Zilani's display, the alien doctor's features showed confusion that gradually transformed into amazement. "This is unprecedented. Your cellular integrity is completely normal. No heat damage, no metabolic stress indicators, no signs of thermal trauma whatsoever." She turned to face Maya directly, her large eyes showing a mixture of professional fascination and personal puzzlement. "How is this possible? Our medical databases indicate that humans should show significant physiological distress after exposure to those temperatures for such an extended period." Maya settled onto an examination table, finally able to remove her helmet and feel the station's now comfortable air on her face. "I think your medical databases might be missing some important information about human environmental adaptability." Dr. Zilani activated a recording device. "Please explain." "This could be significant for updating our understanding of human physiological capabilities." Maya nodded, organizing her thoughts. "Humans evolved as environmental generalists. We don't have specialized adaptations like chitinous armor or specialized circulatory systems, but we developed something potentially more valuable: behavioral and technological adaptability." She gestured toward her environmental suit, which was now cycling through its maintenance routines. "This suit isn't just protective equipment, it's designed to work with human biology, not fight against environmental conditions. Humans have been using technology to extend our environmental range for thousands of years." Dr. Zilani was taking notes rapidly. "But the temperatures you endured would cause heat stroke in humans according to our medical literature." "Medical literature based on what conditions?" Maya asked. "Emergency situations? Unprepared individuals? Humans without proper equipment or training?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I grew up working in desert conditions where summer temperatures regularly exceeded 45 degrees Celsius. My father taught me that heat is just another environmental variable, like pressure or humidity. You learn to work with it instead of fighting against it." Manager Thulwar had been listening to the conversation with growing interest. "You are saying that humans can adapt to extreme conditions through training and experience?" "Within limits, yes," Maya replied. "But more importantly, we adapt through technology and technique. My suit's cooling system worked perfectly, because it was designed by humans who understood both the environmental challenges and our biological responses to them." Commander Vextar's voice joined the conversation through the station's communication system. "Chun, we're receiving reports that the thermal repairs have exceeded expected efficiency. The mining station is now operating at 105% of normal capacity." Maya smiled. "The calibration adjustments I made optimized thermal flow for this specific planetary environment. The original settings were based on standard parameters that didn't account for the unique conditions here." "Outstanding work," Vextar replied. "Prepare for extraction in 2 hours. The shuttle will return once external temperatures drop to acceptable levels for standard EVA operations." As they waited for extraction, Maya found herself in conversation with crew members from a dozen different species, all asking questions about human environmental capabilities and thermal regulation techniques. What had begun as a technical repair mission had evolved into an impromptu educational session about human adaptability. Lieutenant Brock approached her with what she had learned to recognize as thoughtful curiosity among his people. Human Chun, I admit that I misjudged your capabilities. When I first learned that someone of your apparent physical limitations was volunteering for this mission, I assumed it was either ignorance or misplaced courage. His granite-like features shifted in what might have been a smile. I now understand that it was actually competence. You succeeded not despite your human limitations, but because of human adaptability that is not recorded in our standard databases. Maya appreciated his honesty. Lieutenant Brock, I want to emphasize what I did today. The shuttle thermos descended through the thick atmosphere of Kepler 442b, like a metal fish diving into an ocean of fire. Maya pressed her face to the small porthole, watching the mining station grow larger against the hellish backdrop of the planet's surface. Steam and heat distortion rose from the ground in shimmering waves, making the entire landscape appear to dance and wreathe. Beside her, Pilot Sergeant Crixavellan, whose natural habitat was the ice moons of the outer system, kept checking and rechecking his environmental suit's cooling systems. His blue-scaled skin had already taken on a deeper shade that Maya had learned indicated stress among his people. Temperature outside the shuttle is now 71 degrees Celsius and rising, Crix announced, his voice tight with discomfort. Station approach control reports cooling system failures in Section C. Through G, they've evacuated non-essential personnel to the upper levels. Maya nodded. Her attention focused on her tablet where she was reviewing the station's technical schematics one final time. The mining station was a marvel of engineering. Massive facility that extracted rare minerals from deep beneath the planet's surface while maintaining a pressurized, supposedly habitable environment for its 300 workers. How are you feeling, Shun? Commander Vexstar's voice crackled through the communication system from the Meridian's edge, which remained safely in orbit above them. Maya keyed her unit. All systems normal, Commander. Environmental suit is functioning perfectly, and I'm ready to begin diagnostic procedures upon arrival. There was a pause before Vexstar responded. Remember our agreement. First sign of thermal stress, and you're extracted immediately. Understood, sir. The shuttle settled onto the station's landing pad with a gentle bump, and Maya could immediately hear the increased whir of cooling fans throughout their small craft. Even with full environmental protection, the heat outside was making the shuttle's systems work harder to maintain comfortable internal conditions. Sergeant Crix turned to her, his large eyes showing concern. The external temperature reading is now 74 degrees. My people would be unconscious at these levels without heavy environmental support. Maya checked her own suit's displays. The environmental system was working well within normal parameters, drawing power at only 60% of capacity. Her biological monitors showed elevated heart rate from anticipation, but her core temperature remained stable at exactly 37 degrees Celsius. Then it's a good thing you've got that environmental support, Maya said with a smile that didn't quite hide her own nervous energy. Ready for Eva? The airlock cycled through its sequence with mechanical precision, and Maya stepped out onto the landing pad. The heat hit her suit immediately. She could feel the environmental systems responding, increasing cooling flow and adjusting thermal regulation. But underneath the suit's protection, she felt comfortable, alert, ready to work. Station Manager Tholwar was waiting for them at the pad's edge, his massive culverin frame making him look like a living boulder in an environmental suit. Despite his people's natural resistance to temperature extremes, even he was showing signs of stress. His usual granite-gray skin had taken on a reddish tinge, and his movements were more careful than usual. Specialist Chun, he rumbled in his native language, the universal translator converting his words with slight delay. I admit I am surprised to see a human volunteer for surface operations in these conditions. Just doing my job, Manager Tholwar, Maya replied, following him toward the station's main entrance. I understand you've been having cascading thermal regulation failures. 3 major systems offline in the past 48 hours, Tholwar confirmed, his voice heavy with frustration. We've had to evacuate the lower mining levels entirely. Production is down to 20% of normal capacity, and if we lose the primary cooling grid, we'll have to evacuate the entire station. They entered the station through a series of airlocks, each one providing a brief respite from the external heat before the next stage of their journey into the facility. Maya noted that even inside the protected environment, the temperature was noticeably elevated. Her suit's sensors read 42 degrees Celsius in the corridors, hot enough to make most species deeply uncomfortable despite being well within the station's supposed safe parameters. The repair crews have been working 2-hour shifts maximum, Thulwar explained as they walked through the main corridor. Even with cooling suits, prolonged exposure to the working areas causes thermal stress that compromises their efficiency. Maya nodded, observing the activity around them. She could see crew members moving more slowly than usual, taking frequent breaks in designated cooling areas, and she noticed that several species she would normally expect to see were entirely absent from the working areas. They took an elevator down to level 7, where the primary thermal regulation systems were housed. As the doors opened, Maya felt her environmental suit respond to another increase in ambient temperature. The corridor here was noticeably hotter, and she could see heat distortion in the air itself. External environmental temperature on this level is 49 degrees Celsius, Thulwar said, consulting a wall-mounted display. The thermal regulation equipment generates additional heat during operation, making working conditions even more challenging. Maya checked her suit's readings. The environmental system was now operating at 75% capacity, still well within normal operating parameters, but definitely working harder. Her biological monitors continued to show stable core temperature and normal stress indicators. They approached the main thermal control room, where 3 technicians were working on a complex array of heat exchangers and cooling circuits. Maya recognized the species 2 Thaxians and 1 Corvan, all wearing heavy-duty cooling suits that made them look like walking refrigerators. How long have they been working? Maya asked. 45 minutes this shift, Thulwar replied. They'll need to rotate out in 15 minutes to avoid thermal stress casualties. Maya studied the working technicians through the observation window. They were moving deliberately, taking frequent breaks, and she could see the strain in their body language even through their bulky protective equipment. Their cooling suits were massive, powered by external systems that required heavy cables and cooling lines. Mind if I take a look at the technical specifications while they work? Maya asked. Thulwar gestured to a workstation equipped with multiple displays and diagnostic equipment. All our technical data is available through this terminal. But I should warn you, the ambient temperature in the actual working area reaches 53 degrees when the equipment is running. That's beyond safe limits for most species, even with protection. Maya settled at the workstation and began reviewing the technical data. The problem was complex but not unprecedented. The primary heat exchangers were developing efficiency losses that created a cascading effect through the entire thermal management system. Each failed component put additional stress on the remaining systems, accelerating their failure rate, but the solution required someone to work directly with the heat exchangers for an extended period, recalibrating the thermal flow patterns and replacing several key components that were buried deep in the system's core. Manager Thulwar, Maya said after studying the data for 20 minutes, I think I can fix this, but it's going to require continuous work for at least 3 hours, possibly 4. And someone will need to be in direct contact with the primary heat exchangers during most of that time. Thulwar's rocky features creased with concern. Impossible. No one can work in those conditions for more than 2 hours, and that's with our heaviest cooling equipment. The core heat exchangers are located in an area where ambient temperature reaches 58 degrees Celsius. Maya nodded thoughtfully. What if someone could work without the heavy cooling equipment? Without cooling equipment? Thulwar's voice rose with alarm. That would be suicide. Even Corvins require environmental protection at those temperatures. Not suicide, Maya said quietly. Just very, very hot. She stood up from the workstation and began checking her environmental suit systems. The suit was designed for extended operations in extreme conditions. But it wasn't the massive, refrigerator-like apparatus the other technicians were wearing. It was sleek, efficient, and designed to work with human biology rather than fighting against environmental conditions. "Specialist Chun," Thulwar said, his voice carrying a tone of deep concern. "I cannot authorize such a risk. If something happens to you down here, it will be my responsibility. And if the thermal systems fail completely, how many lives will be at risk?" Maya countered. "The entire station, correct? 300 people?" Before Thulwar could respond, Maya's unit crackled with Commander Vextar's voice from orbit. "Chin, report your status. We're monitoring elevated temperatures in your location." Maya keyed her communicator. "Status is good, Commander. I've identified the problem and I believe I can fix it, but it will require extended work in high-temperature conditions." "Define high temperature." Vextar's voice carried a note of warning. Maya glanced at Thulwar, who was monitoring the thermal readings. "Working area temperatures of approximately 58 degrees Celsius, sir. Possibly higher near the primary heat exchangers." The silence on the communication channel stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Vextar responded. The transport ship Meridian's Edge hummed through the void between stars, carrying its mixed crew toward the mining station orbiting Kepler 442b in the ship's briefing room. Tension filled the air like smoke from an electrical fire. Maya-chan sat quietly at the oval table, her dark eyes scanning the holographic display that showed the hellish world they were approaching. Streams of data scrolled past surface temperature, readings that made even the hardiest aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. The planet's mining station operated in conditions that pushed the limits of environmental suits and life support systems. Commander Vextar, a towering Thaxian with chitinous armor covering his segmented body, leaned forward on his 4 primary arms. His compound eyes fixed on Maya with what she had learned to recognize as concern mixed with skepticism. The Thaxians were known throughout the galaxy for their ability to withstand extreme conditions, but even they found Kepler 442b challenging. The surface operations on this world push temperatures beyond what most species can handle, Vextar said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones typical of his people. The mining crews work in shifts of no more than 2 hours, even with full environmental protection. The heat stress on biological systems is ... considerable. Around the table, the other crew members nodded in agreement. Dr. Zilani, whose people evolved in the frozen methane caves of Europa Station, actually shuddered at the thought. Her pale blue skin seemed to grow even paler as she studied the temperature readings. "The ambient temperature in the working areas reaches 67 degrees Celsius, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even the Corvin heavy workers require cooling systems that consume enormous amounts of power." Maya looked up from her tablet, where she had been reviewing the technical specifications of their mission. "That's about 152 degrees Fahrenheit, she said quietly, more to herself than to the group. Several aliens around the table looked at her with confusion. The human temperature scale was unfamiliar to most of them. Lieutenant Brock, a stocky Corvan whose people were known for their physical strength and endurance, snorted with what might have been amusement. His rocky, granite-like skin was naturally resistant to many environmental hazards, but even he showed respect for the conditions they would face. "The human thinks in her primitive measurements," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "But the reality remains the same. This heat will test even our most robust personnel." Commander Vextar's attention returned to Maya, and she could sense the weight of his doubt. She was the newest member of this crew, picked up at the last station because they needed a systems engineer with her specific qualifications. Her small frame and seemingly delicate appearance had already raised questions among the crew about her suitability for hazardous duty. "Chun," Vextar said, using her surname as was military protocol. "Your personnel file indicates you have experience with high-temperature operations, but nothing quite like this. The mining station has requested additional technical support, and your expertise with thermal regulation systems makes you our best candidate for the surface assignment." Maya nodded slowly. She had reviewed the mission parameters thoroughly and understood why they needed her skills. The mining station's environmental controls were failing, and someone with her background in thermal engineering was essential to prevent a complete shutdown of operations. However, Vextar continued, his voice taking on a tone of protective authority, I have serious concerns about sending you down there. Humans are ... fragile. Your species evolved in relatively mild conditions, and your biological tolerances are well documented in our medical databases. Dr. Teshai, the ship's medical officer, gestured to a display showing human physiological data. His tentacled head swayed slightly as he spoke in his melodious voice. Human core temperature regulation begins to fail at relatively low heat levels. Hyperthermia, heat stroke, cellular damage, these are serious risks for your species at these temperatures. Maya had heard variations of this concern throughout her career in interstellar service. Humans were often seen as the soft species among the galactic community, too hot, too cold, too dry, too wet. Everything seemed to affect them adversely according to the medical textbooks most aliens studied. The mining crews are already struggling with equipment failures, Vextar continued. 3 different cooling systems have malfunctioned in the past month, and productivity has dropped by 30%. We cannot afford to have our technical specialists become a casualty. The briefing room fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's environmental systems. Maya could feel the eyes of her crewmates on her, measuring her, calculating her limitations. It was a familiar feeling, one that had followed her throughout her service in the Galactic Maritime Corps she had grown up on. Earth's Australian outback, in regions where summer temperatures regularly soared above 45 degrees Celsius. Her childhood had been spent working alongside her engineer father at solar collection stations and geothermal plants, learning to repair equipment while the sun beat down mercilessly on the red earth around them, but she knew that her crewmates saw only the official data, the medical profiles that labeled humans as environmentally sensitive, the cautionary notes about temperature regulation, and the warnings about heat-related injuries that appeared in every interspecies medical manual. Permission to speak freely, Commander? Maya asked, her voice calm and steady. Vextar's compound eyes focused on her with interest. Granted. I understand your concerns and I respect the caution. But I've worked in high-temperature environments my entire career. I know my limitations, and I know when those limitations might compromise a mission. Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. I also know that the thermal regulation systems on that mining station are exactly the type of technology I've specialized in for the past 8 years. Lieutenant Brock leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his considerable weight. Confidence is admirable, human, but reality is unforgiving. The heat down there will overwhelm your body's cooling systems within minutes. The Corvan speaks truth, Dr. Zelani added, her voice still carrying that note of worry. Your species lacks the natural adaptations that allow others to function in such conditions. You have no protective carapace, no specialized circulatory systems, no natural insulation against thermal extremes. Maya nodded respectfully to each speaker. She understood their perspective. Most of their species had evolved specific biological adaptations to handle environmental extremes. The Thaxians had their chitinous armor and specialized hemolymph that could dissipate heat efficiently. The Corvans had skin like living stone that provided natural insulation. Even Dr. Zelani's people had biological antifreeze in their circulatory systems. You're absolutely right, Maya said, surprising several of the aliens around the table. Humans don't have those adaptations. We don't have armor or specialized blood or natural insulation. She paused, letting that acknowledgement settle before continuing. What we do have is something different. We adapt through behavior, through technology, and through mental conditioning. We survive by learning, by planning, and by refusing to give up when conditions get difficult. Commander Vextar's head tilted slightly, a gesture Maya had learned indicated curiosity among his people. Explain. The mining station's thermal regulation systems are based on cascading heat exchange principles technology that was originally developed by humans for use in Earth's desert. regions, and volcanic zones. I didn't just study these systems. I helped design some of the protocols currently in use throughout the sector. Maya activated her tablet and projected a three-dimensional schematic into the air above the conference table. The image showed the complex network of cooling systems, heat exchangers, and environmental controls that kept the mining station habitable. The current failure pattern suggests a cascade error in the primary heat exchange matrix, she continued, manipulating the display to highlight specific components. These systems require someone who understands not just the technical specifications, but the underlying principles of thermal dynamics in extreme environments. Dr. Keshaya's tentacles writhed with what Maya had learned to recognize as professional interest. Your qualifications are not in question, Chun, but qualification means nothing if the environment renders you incapacitated before you can apply your expertise. Then let me prove otherwise, Maya said simply. Give me a chance to show that human adaptability extends beyond what the medical databases suggest. The room fell silent again. Around the table, she could see her crewmates exchanging glances and subtle communications in the various ways their species conveyed uncertainty and concern. Finally, Commander Vextar spoke. The risk remains significant. If you become incapacitated during the operation, we lose both our technical specialist and potentially compromise the entire mission. And if the thermal systems continue to fail while we debate capabilities, Maya replied, we lose the mining station, 300 workers, and 6 months of strategic resource extraction that the Alliance desperately needs. It was a good point, and everyone in the room knew it. The mining operation on Kepler 442b was producing rare elements essential for faster-than-light drive systems. A complete shutdown would have consequences far beyond this single station, Lieutenant.